Alex Newman, thank you so much for joining me again today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's good to see you. I've been reading some of your articles lately, and I wanted to talk to you about Blackrock. I think most everybody's heard about them, but I don't think they understand what their game plan is, how much influence they really have, and how that could affect us in a really negative way if they're able to continue down this road. But starting out, I guess just explain to people in case they're not that familiar, what is BlackRock? What does it do? It has, $10 trillion under management. How does that affect us? What does that look like?
Yeah, thank you, Curtis. I think this is such a huge issue, and conservatives and Christians really need to understand what's happening here. So BlackRock is what's called an investment manager or an asset manager. They basically take other people's money and then manage that, so-called. So they might have pension funds, for example. If a pension fund's got $1 billion, they might hand it over to BlackRock to invest for them. And so BlackRock, based on the goals and the ideas of this pension fund, they might invest some of that into stocks. They might invest some of that into bonds. They might invest some of that into other asset classes. And the thinking is, well, BlackRock is huge. They've got a lot of information. They're going to be able to earn better returns. So they've got, like you said, about $10 trillion under management. For perspective, that's more than the economy of every single country in the world except the United States and China. It is massive, massive, massive. It's one of the biggest shareholders in almost every company you can think of, right? The Fortune 500 company. In many cases, they own competitors, right? They'll own a big stake in Coca-Cola, then they'll own a big stake in Pepsi. And so they have these huge stakes in these companies. Now, again, it's not their money, right? They're investing that money on behalf of, it might be a regular person. It might be your retirement fund. It might be your 401k. If you're a government school teacher or a firefighter, it might be your state or your county pension. And so then they're investing that, and then they're voting the shares. That's where the real problem comes in. So say they have my investment, my retirement invested in partly shares of Coca-Cola. Well, they might take those shares and, at the annual shareholder meeting, they might say, well, hey, you don't have enough transgenders in your commercials. You don't have enough diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. You're not buying enough carbon credits from Al Gore to offset your CO2 emissions. What's your plan for that? And if the answer is, well, we're not going to do that because that's stupid, well, you're not going to be on the board of directors for much longer because BlackRock's going to come in and they're going to vote those shares. And so on your behalf, they're purging good directors, they're terrorizing good directors, and they're promoting bad directors to make all these companies woke. So that's kind of the
Yeah,
50,000 foot view, the tip of the iceberg, Curtis.
yeah, no, that's great, and that helps people understand the woke ideology in the businesses. When you see it hurting the companies, and they do it anyway, you're like, something's going on here. Because traditionally, you're like, no, we're doing things to make money, to build happy customers, and that doesn't seem to be the agenda anymore. To explain, I know two key facets of it, the metrics they use. Explain ESG, what that is, and why it's so deadly, and then DEI. Those are the two main ways they kind of lay out the framework of what they're going to do.
Yeah, so actually, just very recently, in the last month or so, Larry Fink, the guy who started and runs BlackRock, has officially distanced himself from the
Yeah.
term ESG, only because it's become incredibly toxic. They've got, state attorneys general nipping at their heels, investigating. I've spoken to many of these state attorneys general, and I think they're right to do these investigations. They've got states and counties all across the country, investors saying we're going to pull our money out because you're wasting it on climate stuff and ESG stuff. So a little bit of background there. ESG is a concept that was first formulated by a United Nations bureaucrat, a United Nations Finance Initiative bureaucrat. So E stands for environmental, S stands for social, G stands for governance. And the way this works is people like Larry Fink at BlackRock, and he's not alone, right? Klaus Schwab over at the World Economic Forum has been a big promoter of this idea. The UN's been a big promoter of this idea. So traditionally in a free market system, as you just pointed out, Curtis, the point of a company is to make money, right, for shareholders. The reason I buy part of a company through the stock market, through the purchasing of shares, is because I want to earn a return on that, whether that be in the form of dividends, whether that be in the form of the company increasing in value because it's gaining more market share, whatever it is. I want to make money. That's the reason why we invest in companies. Well, along come people like Larry Fink and Klaus Schwab, and they say, nope, it's not enough to just worry about if a company is profitable. It's not enough to just think about how risky this investment is. We need to be thinking about environmental, social, and governance concerns. And so on the environmental front, and Larry Fink has articulated this all clearly in his letters. Every year he does what he calls a letter to CEOs, which is basically like, it's almost like a mafia intimidation tactic. You either do this or we're going to have a problem. Okay. It's kind of a stern warning. So on the environmental front, they'll say, well, climate change is a big problem and we have to fight CO2 emissions. So what are you as a company doing to fight CO2 emissions? Now, if you're giving a lot of money to Al Gore and his fraudulent carbon credit companies where they're uprooting African villages to replace them with trees and then selling guilty, silly Westerners carbon credits, then all right, you get bonus points on the E side. On the social side, well, you have a lot of transgenders in your commercials for your razors or for your deodorant, so you get extra bonus points there on the social side. Then you get to the governance. Well, are you do you have enough so-called minorities on your board of directors? Forget whether they're competent business people, forget whether they actually add value to the board. We want to see at least 3 transgender, agender, bisexual, BIPOCs, indigenous, black, people of color. So they're coming up with all these arbitrary metrics, and then they're investing money based partly on these ESG scores. Now, DEI fits right in with this. So DEI, I call it DIE. It stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just flipped the I and the E around. And the diversity, we all know what that means now. They don't mean intellectual diversity. They mean, do you have people with enough different pigmentations of their skin? Do you have enough genders? Do you have a trigender and a genderqueer and a pansexual on your board of directors? Do you train all of your employees with quarterly or yearly DEI sessions where they learn that if you have European ancestors, you were born with privilege and you're an oppressor? If you're a heterosexual or a cisgender, you're an oppressor. Whereas if you have BIPOC ancestors, Black, Indigenous, people of color, you're a victim, you're oppressed. This is, of course, standard Marxist rhetoric adapted for the American context in the 21st century. And so that's what they mean by DEI. Now, that is one of the metrics they are using to determine who's going to get capital, who's going to get loans, who's going to be able to do business with companies. And so this is the reason why, people are looking at companies like Bud Light. People are looking at companies like Target. People are looking at companies like Disney that lost, $1 billion on their last 10 terrible garbage movies. Why are they doing this? What in the world would drive these companies to lose all this money? Why are they burning up shareholder value? The reason is they're trying to satisfy these totalitarians like Larry Fink pushing the ESG and the DEI. That's why they're making all these decisions that on the surface make no sense for a supposedly profit-making business.
Yeah, no, that's what's a shock that's been the biggest transition I've seen over my life, where it was always about the customer, because that means if you have happy customers, you're going to make good profits. And so it was always focused on that. Now it's completely gone a different direction. One of the quotes that you said in one of your articles, you said this: BlackRock chairman and CEO Larry Fink has bragged repeatedly about what he is doing with your money. Behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing that we are asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock, we are forcing behaviors. It is true, BlackRock is in fact forcing behaviors on companies as well as on the people who work in those companies and even consumers. Explain that.
Yeah, and that's one of the mistakes that some conservatives make. Well, this is just affecting the company. No, it's not. A company is an abstract idea. A company is a collection of individuals. You've got the shareholders, obviously. You've got the management. You've got the employees, and then you've got the customers. And so when BlackRock is forcing change on companies, they're forcing change. They're forcing behavior change on everybody involved in that company. So this is really a form of behavior modification. And and it sounds kind of innocent at first glance. You hear Klaus Schwab talk about the founder of the World Economic Forum talk about stakeholder capitalism, as he would put it. And he said, it sounds nice. Oh, the company shouldn't just be focused on shareholders; they should be focused on all the stakeholders. And among these, we have the governments. And of course, this is not a new idea, right? That companies shouldn't just be focused on making money for shareholders by satisfying the needs and wants of customers. They should be focused on these ESG metrics. And so this is where the behavior change comes in. This is exactly the concept that Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini used in their, National Socialism, fascism. It's really different terms for the same thing, where on paper, you could still have private ownership of a company, But the company is not primarily working to benefit shareholders. It's working to do what the government says. And so in Nazi Germany, yeah, you could still own your factory, but your factory better produce what Der Fuhrer says, because the government is a major stakeholder. And if you won't produce what Der Fuhrer says, then you're going to lose your company, you're going to be bankrupted, et cetera. It's exactly what we're facing here with this woke investing. If you won't adapt to the behaviors that Klaus Schwab and Larry Fink want you to adopt, you will be defunded. You'll have investment pulled. Nobody will do business with you anymore. Your ESG score will go down. And so that will cause other companies to not want to do business with you, because then their ESG score will go down. So it has this cascading effect down the line where behaviors really are changing, and they're not changing in a desirable way. It's enough for a company to try to focus on making money. I mean, just that in and of itself is incredibly difficult, incredibly complex. You got to figure out, what are the inputs that we need? How are we going to create value, add value to sell this to willing customers? That's a very, very complex process. To then add in all these goofy things like climate change and transgenderism and the diversity, equity, and inclusion, it distracts from the company's main mission. It causes massive misallocations of capital, where money is going into things that they never would go into because consumers are not demanding them. Right. So the catastrophic implications of this are huge. Then when you recognize that the people setting these goals, other than profit, are absolutely evil, you realize that the error then is going to be compounded exponentially.
Yeah, no, it's really amazing. Now, Larry Fink, we all know, he's the CEO and founder of this, but tell us a little bit about him. Does he have any ties or connections that we should be concerned with?
that's a loaded question right there, Curtis. But no, this is so important for people to understand.
Yes.
Larry Fink is not just a smart businessman who made a lot of money. Okay, first of all, he made his money through massive cronyism, through incredibly slimy connections to the political apparatus and the monetary apparatus, the central banks of the world. This is absolutely demonstrable. This is absolutely provable. If you look at the best times for BlackRock, it's when they were put in charge of the government's bailout programs, where they were bailing out companies that they owned, incidentally. Where they were working with the Federal Reserve to deal with these bailouts. They were helping to run the Maiden Lane and Maiden 2 during the big economic meltdown in 2007, 2008. So BlackRock has enriched itself and its leadership through your tax money, through my tax money, and through its relationship with central banks that are, of course, creating money out of thin air. And adding to that, Larry Fink is connected to basically all the big deep state institutions that you can think of. He's on the board of trustees for the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab. Now, the World Economic Forum is a strategic partner of the United Nations in implementing Agenda 2030, which, as the head of the UN General Assembly said, is the master plan for humanity. A little bit of hubris there, I think. Of course, God makes master plans for humanity, not the United Nations, right? But anyways, that's what they're calling it. So you've got the World Economic Forum pursuing transparently globalist and if you read the social sustainable development goals, the Agenda 2030 is made up of 17 sustainable development goals. What you'll find is this is really totalitarian government writ large. It's a blank check for governments to have unlimited power. So the World Economic Forum that Larry Fink serves on the board of trustees for is very, very openly hostile to the principles that our country was founded on. It is openly bringing together the biggest businesses in the world, the governments of the world, even religious leaders, all together to bring about this global transformation, as Klaus Schwab calls it, the Great Reset. Doesn't stop there. Larry Fink is also on the board of directors for the Council on Foreign Relations. This is one of the most important organizations in America, and yet your average American has never even heard of it, or they may have, read a quote from an expert at a nonpartisan think tank called the CFR, and it just kind of blends in with all the rest of it. Nobody pays much attention. The CFR is, I call it deep state headquarters in the United States of America. One of the guys who revealed back in the 1960s some of the most important details about how the establishment really operates, Bill Clinton's mentor, incidentally, Carroll Quigley at Georgetown University, he explained that Cecil Rhodes and a network of these globalists who wanted a one world system set up all these institutes. He called it the roundtable groups. And so you have concentric circles. And he said the outpost of these roundtable groups in the United States is the Council on Foreign Relations. It was set up after the U.S. Senate refused to get us involved in the League of Nations for the purpose of preparing America to surrender its sovereignty to a one world government. We've had whistleblowers coming out of this organization who've told us what's going on. One great example is Admiral Chester Ward. He spent 16 years as a member. I have his book behind me. He co-wrote a book with Phyllis Schlafly called Kissinger on the Couch. And one of the things he says in there is that the main purpose of the Council on Foreign Relations is to promote the disarmament of U.S. sovereignty and our submergence into an all-powerful one-world government. Those are direct quotes from one of the highest-ranking military officers in the United States. He eventually defected. He said, I'm not going to have anything to do with this organization. Hillary Clinton said while she was Secretary of State that this is the organization that tells her what she should be doing and how she should be thinking about the future. Joe Biden actually said publicly on stage at a CFR event, Richard Haas, the president at the time of the CFR, introduced himself. He said, hi, I work here at the Council on Foreign Relations. And Joe Biden says, and I work for Richard, right? As he's serving as vice president, forget the American people. And of course, there are plenty of Republicans involved, right? Dick Cheney, former vice president, used to be on the board of directors for the CFR. And the CFR has been pretty transparent about its agenda. If you read its magazine, Foreign Affairs, Admiral Chester Ward said, if you want to know the policy of the U.S. government a couple of years in advance, just sign up for a subscription to their magazine, and you'll know what that is. And that has held true until Donald Trump came along. That really was the norm. Didn't matter Republican or Democrat. So you have all that going on. The CFR, incredibly powerful organization, and Larry Fink is on the board. Now, they've got corporate members, right? The big media companies are corporate members, the big banks, the big pharmaceutical companies, journalists, judges, multiple Supreme Court judges. I mean, you name it, they're involved with CFR, but you never hear about that. So that's the kind of milieu that Larry Fink finds himself in. He's also a member of the Trilateral Commission, another one of these incredibly significant deep state organizations set up by David Rockefeller, who served as chairman of the CFR for a very long time. So the Trilateral Commission, a little bit of a different organization than CFR. It's much smaller, much more elite, if you will, and it's not exclusively focused on the American system, right? They bring in people from Western Europe, from Canada, and also from Japan. And it was based on the ideas put forth in a book by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who served as a national security advisor in the Jimmy Carter administration. The book was called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Age. And basically, it's warmed over technocracy, right? You got to get rid of self-government. You've got to get rid of kind of the constitutional republic that we have in the United States. He says Marxism was actually kind of the next step forward in this evolution. But ultimately, we need to move to a system, he says in this book, where experts and scientists will kind of be making the decisions and running society for us. Forget, you're voting and you don't need to vote. What do you know about anything, right? Let the experts handle these things. So David Rockefeller fell in love with this idea, and it had been circulating at Columbia University, where Zbigniew Brzezinski was for decades prior to that, right? Pat Wood has done a lot of work exposing this in his books. And so this idea that we're really going to abolish nation states, we're going to abolish self-government, that is the kind of stuff that Larry Fink is involved in. And then you add to that his relationship with the government, right? And I say in the article, it's very difficult to tell where BlackRock ends and the Biden administration begins. There's this revolving door, and Obama, Hillary Clinton, all same thing. There's this revolving door between senior administration and White House positions and senior management at BlackRock. And there are so many examples, we couldn't even go through them all today, but some of the top people at BlackRock come from Obama, Hillary, Biden world. Some of the top officials at the Biden administration come from BlackRock world. So it's all one horrific monster, and you don't see that because the media is not talking about it, but it's incredibly dangerous, Curtis.
Yeah, no, it's in that. So people, all those great facts he just gave, the bottom line of it is this company and Larry Fink, who's totally in bed with all of the globalists, all of the people that seek to take away our freedoms and everything. He's come up with a clever scheme to get the money of the world in his hands, where he controls it to be able to, again, force companies to do whatever he says, force governments to do whatever he says, because once you start controlling the big companies, they have a lot of pressure they can put on governments of the world and different things. So it's just a machine that is being created, and that is the reason we see so many things that don't make sense. It's because it's being manipulated by this company. And talk about how they're forcing this transition to net zero and what nonsense that is. The one thing I always bring up before you go that just blows my mind is that they say they're the green movement, and carbon dioxide is, fertilizer for everything that is green. I always want you people to remember this. Don't you buy for 1 second the lie that carbon dioxide is a pollutant and we have too much of it. We are at the very bottom of the scale. it would be a blessing if we could at least double the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. And the people or the things that would enjoy it the most would be everything that is green. And when they're doing well, we're doing well. But talk about that net zero, how destructive that is. But what's the agenda behind it?
Yeah, that's such an important point to emphasize there, Curtis. The idea that CO2 is pollution from a scientific perspective is absolutely preposterous. I interviewed, I spoke at a conference with Donald Trump's climate advisor, a very well-respected physics professor at Princeton University, Dr. Will Happer, just a great guy, just a scientist, right? He's not an ideologue. He's not a political guy. He's just a scientist. And what he said to me, I'll never forget, because Princeton physicists saying something like that. But he said plants are designed to operate in an atmosphere with 4 to 5 times as much CO2 as we have right now. He said that that's why farmers pump it into their greenhouses. It's wonderful for green things, for plants, and of course we eat plants. Our animals eat plants, and so that's a wonderful thing. The idea that it controls the temperature of the planet, absolutely ludicrous. This harebrained idea has been put forward by totalitarians and globalists and communists for many decades now. They used to say CO2 is going to cause global cooling. We need to shut down your factories. We need to shut down your energy because we'll have global cooling. Then it became, global warming, and that didn't pan out. Then it was climate change. Now they just keep coming up with new stuff. But it's important for people to understand this is a fraudulent hypothesis that's totally discredited by the evidence. I've interviewed many of the UN's own scientists on this from the UN IPCC. They'll tell you the UN is lying. So with that out of the way, net zero is the idea that we need to have net zero, not just CO2 emissions, but also all these other gases that they claim are bad, like methane and things. And of course, one way to do that, as they will tell you, is to completely eliminate the population of humans on the planet. That would result in net zero emissions from human beings into the atmosphere. But they won't go that far. Bill Gates will sometime, and he famously said in a TED talk that we got to reduce the population by 10 or 15% using vaccines and reproductive health care. That's code word for abortion and contraception. But they often say, well, we can't reduce the population to zero, so we've got to come up with other ways to do that. Now they're coming up with all kinds of harebrained ideas. Many of them are just scams to rip you off. This carbon capture, we're going to pump the CO2 underground, free fracking fuel. And free money for the big oil companies. So they love that stupid idea. But a lot of it also involves shutting down industry. And what's so interesting about this, Curtis, is as you listen to these people, as you go to these things, they clearly don't believe this stuff themselves, right? And I'll give you a very clear example. Yes. First of all, they fly around in private jets. That should be your first clue. Leonardo DiCaprio out on his 400-foot mega yacht releases more CO2 in a day than you do in your lifetime. But I was at the UN Climate Summit in Paris. And this was fascinating. This is where they came up with the Paris Agreement. And you have Barack Obama. He flies in like Mr. Superhero and says, we're going to slash American CO2 emissions by 30% in the next, 10 or 15 years. I can't remember. 28%, I think he said we'd slash it. The communist Chinese, who were already emitting drastically more CO2 than Americans, they come and say, oh, well, that's very nice, Mr. Obama. We are going to continue increasing our CO2 emissions for maybe 15 years. We'll think about peaking them in maybe 15 years, by which time everybody will have forgotten that. And so you're going to shut down energy production in the United States, which is going to have the effect of causing energy prices to skyrocket, as Obama himself revealed. He said, we want prices to skyrocket. Well, what does that do? That shuts down factories in America because they can't compete in global markets. They move them over to China, where they will be powered with dirty, and I mean dirty in the true sense, not the CO2 sense, but filthy, dirty coal-fired power plants that spit all kinds of pollution, real pollution, out into the atmosphere, drenches the. I mean, there's days you can't even go out of your house in Beijing. So if you truly believed that CO2 was bad for the planet, the last thing in the world you'd want to do is ship our factories and our production over to communist China. And yet that's what they're doing, and they're patting each other on the back for that. So net zero is this idea that we're going to reduce net emissions from humans down to zero, and they're coming up with all kinds of nifty scams. If you give Al Gore enough money for his carbon credits, then he'll evict some more African villages. We'll plant some more forests, and that'll help. John Kerry came out and said we got to completely restructure agriculture. He said you can't talk about net zero without agriculture. And so the UN brought together all of these asset managers, these mega banks, and they've created all these net zero alliances. You've got the net zero banking alliance, the net zero asset manager alliance, and I've actually talked to some of these people at the most recent UN Climate Summit in Egypt, because the state attorneys general were investigating collusion and violations of their fiduciary responsibilities. So I was able to talk to some of the top executives at these things, and they don't really see anything wrong with what they're doing. But they're shutting down industry in America. They're shipping it all over to China under the guise of pursuing this net zero. Of course, everybody with a brain knows net zero is completely impossible without exterminating mankind. But it makes for a very convenient excuse if you want to, say, hypothetically, dismantle the American economy, undermine national security, undermine energy security, and ship everything over to China, which, of course, China is the model for the type of world that they want to build with this fascist technocratic control of everything.
That's right. No, that's the name of the game. That's the agenda behind all this, because it makes no sense for the plants, the people, or anything else, or the businesses. It's a scheme to take down the West, all of Western civilization that's been so prosperous because we follow biblical principles of private property ownership and responsibility and everything. So it's just a clever scheme. Well, how has BlackRock influenced elections and things? Have they done anything in that area to sway things in their direction?
They have. Actually, they're pouring massive amounts of money into the political process right now. They're forcing these woke companies into giving, that's one of the ways you get a better ESG score. If you give a lot of money to Democrats, if you give a lot of money to Black Lives Matter, if you give a lot of money to Human Rights Campaign to promote homosexuality in the schools. So that helps you get a better ESG score. It helps you get a better DEI index score. So that's one of the things they're doing. They're also directly giving a lot of money. In fact, multiple mainstream media propaganda outlets said that when Biden was running for president, Larry Fink actually said, "I'm here to help." Right. So very, very clear conflict of interest there, where BlackRock is enriching itself through its relationship with the federal government, and BlackRock is also helping to install people in power in that federal government that's helping to enrich them. Massive conflict of interest, and their political power and their influence over these institutions is so huge. I want to give you a clear example, Curtis. In 2019, a bunch of former central bankers that BlackRock had hired, put out this report, and they wanted to bring about what really is a revolution when it comes to the institution of central banking, when it comes to monetary policy, and even when it comes to fiscal policy. They proposed this thing called going direct, where, traditionally, a little bit of background here, traditionally fiscal policy, and I don't agree with the system, but traditionally fiscal policy has been in the realm of elected officials, taxing and spending, right? Where is the money going to go? How are we going to get the money? What kind of projects are going to be funded? Central banks, on the other hand, they've been in charge of monetary policy, and the marketing, at least, is that central banks are independent of politics, and so their official mandate, anyways, is to focus on price stability and full employment. They've done an absolutely atrocious job at both of those because, of course, the system by design does that, but that's their mandate, at least. And they're not supposed to be meddling in fiscal policy. That's the purview of elected officials who have accountability to the voters. Well, this going direct idea, this was presented by BlackRock and their central bankers. They said, we want to be able to directly pump money that, by the way, we're creating out of nothing at the central bank into the economy. We want to be able to give it directly to people, to businesses, to our cronies. Of course, I didn't use that word, but that's what they had in mind. And almost instantly, all these governments, all these central banks are saying, hey, let's do this going direct thing. Absolutely amazing. So we've had now this incredible revolution that started right around 2019, 2020, where central banks, and we saw this during the COVID crisis, are directly sending money to their cronies, to big corporations. And next it'll be directly to consumers. Ben Bernanke proposed helicopter money to get money out there. This is the way they want to go. And that completely cuts our elected officials out of the picture. Central bank wants to bail out their cronies at BlackRock or Goldman Sachs or Exxon, or, pick your company. No problem. We'll just print up some money and hand it over. So very, very dangerous system. This is a revolution in fiscal and monetary policy, and it all happened behind closed doors right after BlackRock proposed it. That's the kind of power that this institution has.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. One last thing to explain about them before we go into some solutions and things people can do, but talk about BlackRock's Aladdin AI system and what that does and what they're trying to do with that.
Yeah, so Aladdin is so significant. Now, it stands for something. I don't remember the exact acronym. I could probably find it real quick. But Aladdin is this artificial intelligence platform that basically, they describe it as a risk management tool. I found what it stands for. It's Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network. So it's this AI platform. We don't know what's going on under the hood. I don't have access to the source code, and even if I did, I wouldn't understand it. So we don't know as outsiders what this is programmed to do, but in theory, at least, it's a risk management tool. So it's telling companies, hey, this stock has this much risk associated with it. This company, this industry has this much risk associated with it. And so you may not want to invest money in there. Now, one of the interesting things about Aladdin, once it got to $20 trillion that were being invested based on Aladdin, they stopped revealing. So tens of trillions of dollars are now being invested in the global economy based on whatever Aladdin is programmed to tell it. They're their biggest competitors, right? BlackRock is the largest in the world, but their two biggest competitors, you've got Vanguard and State Street, both of them, which are doing similar things to BlackRock, both of them are using Aladdin to make some of their investment decisions. One of the biggest pension funds in the world, the Japanese pension fund, is using Aladdin. So you've got tens of trillions of dollars now that are being invested based on the code, what this AI system is programmed to spit out. And if you tell it that not having enough transgenders on your board is a risk, well, you might start automatically, right? You don't even have a human involved. Just automatically, money is being diverted out of that company into companies that have a more woke board. If your company is involved in fossil fuel extractions and Aladdin says that's a risky industry, boom, massive money flowing out of that industry. And you know what's so interesting? They always ignore China. They're happy to fund fossil fuel projects in China. They're happy to fund military projects in China. They're using slave labor, et cetera. So they don't really care about ESG. They don't really care about DEI. It's just a tool to bankrupt us here. But Aladdin is so significant, Curtis, because tens of trillions of dollars are being invested or not invested based on whatever these BlackRock programmers have programmed it to do and whatever information is being fed in there. Hard to overstate the danger of it. I mean, even if you assume pure intentions on the part of the people designing this and running it, even if you assume good intentions, which I think would be incredibly naive, what if they make a mistake, right? What if they bankrupt whole industries that are essential to life on this planet, which they seem to be trying to do, at least in America, our energy industries, et cetera? What do? Well, you try to pick up from the wreckage, I guess. So very, very dangerous system. All the big asset managers, a lot of the big mega banks are now using this. A lot of the big insurance companies. Again, it's hard to overstate the danger of this. And we don't even know how big the danger is because we don't even know how much money is being pumped through decisions based on this system.
It's unbelievable. So BlackRock for sure has about 10 trillion of its own funds, but then it's got its fingers in 20 plus trillion of other people's by directing them how to spend their money. So you can see, people, that this thing is so massive. When you have 30 plus trillion dollars where you can help direct where it goes, you can punish anyone that doesn't go along to get along. That's the problem. They can eliminate any competition they don't like, maybe because they're conservative, or maybe they just want to get rid of them so they have a bigger market. But it's almost like a communist system in a way, in that the government there has the power to bless this company and curse this one, or whatever it wants to do. It has that absolute power. This is behind the scenes. It's invisible. It's behind the curtain, but it's really doing the same thing. And that's why we've seen the changes we have seen over the last about 5 years, where it's gotten dramatic. You know, like Gillette, and I've talked about that on here before with those razors. That was my favorite razor. I will never buy one again. When I saw their commercial just glorifying the mutilation of our children, but that's why they would do that, even when it's hurting their business. It's going downhill. They don't care, because they know long run, when everybody else has been eliminated that doesn't do things our way and isn't woke and isn't following our line of thinking, we'll snuff them out in no time, and everyone will be fearful of investing in those companies. And so all of a sudden the money will dry up and those companies will be struggling.
And Curtis, I want to add one more thing here too, because this even affects, a lot of people think, well, that just affects the Fortune 500 companies. I don't work for a Fortune 500. This affects even down to a small rural farm, right? So part of the ESG scores, part of the way they're calculating their emissions, they're going to these farmers that are saying, look, you need to track all of your emissions so that we can report those emissions when we put together our ESG report. You had the CEO of one of the Walmart company, maybe it was Sam's Club or whatever, saying we won't do business anymore with companies if they don't have enough diversity on their board of directors. So if you're a little supplier, supplying some component for something that's sold at Walmart, that's going to affect you. If you're a small farmer and you're not able to keep track of your CO2 emissions or your methane emissions or your nitrogen, that's going to affect everybody, because you're not going to be able to do business then with companies that are doing business with Fortune 500 companies. It's kind of like the social credit score in China,
That's
where,
right.
you know, once that system's in place, I can't even associate with you anymore as a critic of the government, because my social credit score might go down, and then I can't get a good job. I can't send my kids to school. I can't get on an airplane. This will affect everybody. If you have any relationship with the economy, I mean, unless you're a mountain man, you know, fishing and eating bugs out in the wilderness of Montana, this will affect you, and this does affect you.
Absolutely. Well, Alex, I mean, that's sobering, but it's the reality of what's going on. Have you heard any ideas, or you know of any, what's some things the average person can do to stand up against some of this in their small way that makes a big difference over time?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that can be done. And, you know, step one is just awareness. BlackRock has really been able to operate in the shadows for a long time. So they've been able to get away with this. People didn't understand it. People didn't know what was happening. They're outraged about what these companies are doing, but they didn't understand why it was happening. Well, now you know, okay? This is one of the major reasons. And so as a consumer, as an investor, as somebody who probably has a 401k or a retirement or whatever, one thing you can do is immediately pull that out from BlackRock. And you're going to have to do some research here. It's difficult to track everything they do. One of the things that they do, and I didn't even realize this until I started digging it in, they bought the iShares group of ETFs from Barclays. And I was invested in some ETFs through iShares. And when I found out they were BlackRock, I said, well, liquidate that and let's put it somewhere else. Right? So they're making money on you all over the place. You need to, as a responsible investor, as a person with a 401k or retirement account, get that away from BlackRock. Stop letting them use your money to destroy American business, to destroy your country. That's step one, right? And the same thing with your family. If you have a company, if you've got, you know, money parked somewhere, don't invest it through BlackRock. It's a wicked company. They're working against your best interest. And as they themselves will say, they're not even just worried about making money for you anymore. They're worried about all these other crazy things that have nothing to do with whether you're going to maximize your returns, which is really what we pay them for, right? We pay asset managers to make money for us, and that's it. We didn't ask them to worry about CO2 emissions and transgenderism. They shouldn't be doing that. So, folks, pull your money from BlackRock or any fund that is owned, operated, or managed by BlackRock. Secondly, get in touch with your elected officials. You know, here in Florida, our state government pulled billions of dollars out from BlackRock. I interviewed Riley Moore. He's the treasurer for the state of West Virginia. He actually created a coalition. Last time I looked, I think they had 16 state treasurers who were all working on this, pulling their money out of BlackRock. He actually put BlackRock on the state's blacklist so that the state won't even do business with BlackRock now. Not only can they not manage the money, they won't even do business with them. And I think all of our Republican states, at least, should have put this in place a long time ago.
Yes.
There's no reason why the money of the people of Oklahoma or the people of West Virginia or the people of Texas or the people of Florida should be weaponized by this wicked corporation. Also, encourage your law enforcement authorities to look into this. You know, like I said, I've spoken with several state attorneys general who are investigating here. I've done a series of major articles going back some years now for the Epic Times, for the New American, for other publications. And I've had the opportunity to talk to some of these state AGs, and they're serious and they're right to do this. They're saying, you know, first of all, we have what appears to be anti-competitive collusion, right? This is very, very dangerous behavior in a marketplace, especially when it's a company that has such a dominant position. Second of all, these people have a fiduciary obligation. Their job, according to the law, is to make money for you. It's not to worry about whether Al Gore is getting enough money for his stupid carbon credit business or his lab-grown meat. Their job is to make money for you, the person who has that money. And so these state AGs, I think the last time I looked, there was a coalition of about 20 of them that were investigating here. They're saying, are you violating your fiduciary obligations? And, you know, we'll see what comes out of those investigations. Yeah. To me, it looks very clear that BlackRock is violating its fiduciary obligations. So we'll see what happens with that. So those are two things that everybody can do. You know, I've started investing over the last few years with a variety of different companies and a variety of different funds that actually are working to counter this, right? One that I'm invested in is called the Timothy Plan. They invest based on biblical principles. You know, full disclosure, I have some investments in several of their funds, and they've earned very good returns. And what they do is they screen out the most wicked companies. So if your company is promoting the murder of unborn babies, if your company is promoting transgenderism to kids, if your company is getting people addicted to liquor or tobacco or something, they're going to screen you out, and you're not going to get those investment dollars. I think they got $2 billion under management. So it's, you know, it's an ant, it's a flea compared to BlackRock, but it's something. And if more